Good morning. Boy, that piano piece will get us all fired up for the fire of commitment when we get there to sing it. So we join together in solidarity as a covenanted pilgrim people to explore together our life journey and what it means to live life as if we were following an invisible thread. And this series of collective individual threads makes up the interconnected web of life, which we refer to in our 7th principle of Unitarian Universalism. We are called here by the mysterious pull of the sacred and the strong belief that we are indeed, all of us, are living a life that matters. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Tisdell. I was here before. I'm a recently retired professor from Penn State Harrisburg, and a part-time chaplain at the Hershey Medical Center, and a longtime member of the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg, up the street. So I'm delighted to be with you again here a second time. I was with you, I don't know, a couple of months ago, talking about living life as pilgrimage. And this time we're going to explore together what it means to follow an invisible thread. So let us worship and explore together. So get on your feet if you are able, and please join me in singing The Fire of Commitment, 1028, in your hymnal, your teal hymnal. And I am not a soprano, so I struggle on some of those high notes, but hey, you'll fill in for me, right? Okay.
I'm gonna play you a little bit of the melody. It's the same rhythm that we just heard in take 5. So that's why we just did that, to help get you in the groove. We're gonna play a little of the melody, then I'll do the intro.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3.
And now in our service, it's time for our chalice lighting, which is our Unitarian Universalist symbol of our faith. And the chalice lighting today is based on words by Jennifer Grayson. We light this chalice, symbol of our purpose, to bring more love and justice into the world. We light this chalice knowing our congregation as a church by walls, but connected through a web of interconnected invisible threads that make up the web of life and the light of love.
Good morning. I am Marion Joyce, your worship associate this morning and a 35-year member of this congregation. We gather this morning to celebrate the transformative power of a religious community. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whomever you love, whatever you do for a living, you are welcome at UUCL, whether in person or streaming on YouTube. For those who are here in person, we invite you downstairs to join us in the common room after the service for coffee hour. We hope you will join us, even if just for a few minutes. Also, if you are relatively new here, you may not be aware that UU congregations give their ministers the summer off for rest and renewal, but Reverend Howard Dana will be back. If you look at your order of service, you can see he's back in late August. And to learn more about Reverend Howard, you can also go to the staff page on our website. Take a look at the order of service. I have the large copy here. On the back of it, you will see that it lists all the different topics over the summer, and the worship team, along with some guest ministers and speakers, will be leading the summer services. You will not be getting, this is something new, you will be getting the standard order of service every Sunday. And if we deviate a little bit from it, Reverend Howard did tell us to go outside the box from time to time. We'll let you know, but you'll have the standard components of the typical service. Also, Rich in the office will have the page with the announcements, and those are, I think these are the announcements page here, and he's also welcoming our guest speaker, Reverend Elizabeth, and we're so happy to have her back. I think that's covered everything. And as you may or may not know, there will be no Zoom services this summer. However, you can stream it live on YouTube, so you'll be able to do it that way if you can't make it in. So, moving right along, the next thing it says is responsive reading. It is not in the Gray Hymnal this morning. Reverend Libby has chosen one based on words by Joseph Campbell. And I will tell you the refrain. The refrain is, "We do not have to risk this adventure alone. We do not have to risk this adventure alone. We only need try follow the thread of the hero path. We only need to try follow the thread of the hero path." So we do not have to risk this adventure alone. We only need to try to follow the thread of the hero path. And we'll get it after we've said it a few times. For the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We do not have to risk this adventure alone. We only need to try follow the thread of the hero path. And where we had thought to find an abomination, we shall find a great interconnecting web. We do not have to risk this adventure alone. We only need to try to follow the thread of the hero path. Where we had thought to travel outward, we will come to the center of our own existence. We do not have to risk this adventure alone. We only need to try to follow the thread of the hero path. Where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world. We do not have to risk this adventure alone. We only need to try follow the hero thread of the hero path.
From the time that I was a child all the way through now. but I think it's a story that I read a number of years ago now by Lauren Artris that was in her book about walking labyrinths. And she tells this story of this great-grandmother who lives in a castle. I may have told you this before. The great-grandmother who lives in a castle, and she has a great-granddaughter. And she gives the great-granddaughter a ring. And she tells her that attached to the ring is an invisible thread. And if she ever needs direction in her life, the only thing that she has to do is to remember to follow the invisible thread that's attached to the ring. And she will promise to give her guidance. Well, I've never forgotten that story, and it's helped me to sort of make sense of some of my spiritual experiences. And so we also, in the Native American tradition, in the Hopi tradition, rather than the great-grandmother and the invisible ring, there's grandmother spider. And grandmother spider is weaving webs of connection. So most of you have probably heard these stories before, right? So what we're going to explore today is this notion of spiritual experience and this notion of following an invisible thread. And I remember, I was an academic for 35 years, and I used to go away during the summer. And this one summer when I came back, I lived in downtown Harrisburg at the time, and this beautiful yellow garden spider, big, you've probably seen them, they're big and yellow, had woven this incredible spider web outside my window. And I was so creative that I named her Charlotte. And I got to watch how Charlotte operated for the next couple of weeks. And whenever anything came in to, destroy her web, she would, catch her not her spider, a fly or whatever she was into. And if there was any broken threads, that next night she'd be weaving this thing back together. So she was very into keeping the web together. And so from watching her for a couple of weeks, I realized that I had spent an awful lot of time pondering the nature of wisdom, but not a whole lot of time pondering the wisdom of nature. And so for those couple of weeks, she was my wisdom teacher, and so I learned a lot from Charlotte. So when you're talking about spiritual experiences, we don't always know exactly what we're talking about and what we mean by that, especially in UU circles. And I think I may have said this the last time that I was here, but jazz pianist Mary Lou Williams, sometimes when she was playing the piano and she didn't think people were paying attention, she'd pound on the piano, she'd stop and pound on the piano and say, "Listen, this will heal you." And so I think of spiritual experiences as those kinds of experiences that stop you in your tracks and say, "Listen, this will heal you." So a number of years ago, actually in 1999, when you're an academic, you have to do research. And I did a research study on how spirituality informs the work of activists, social activists, who said that spirituality was an influence in why they were doing what they were doing. So I interviewed 31 educators. Less than half of them were white. Most of them were people of color. And that was intentional on my part, because when you looked at books on spirituality at the time, it was really spirituality of white people. It didn't say that on the cover, of course. But when you looked at the samples, that tended to be who they are, white, Christian, or Judeo-Christian tradition. So more than half of them, like I say, were people of color. And I asked them, rather than to define what spirituality was for me, I asked them to tell me 3 significant spiritual experiences that they had had in their life. And then I asked them what their definition of spirituality was, because in essence, their definition was embedded in their experiences. Now we're going to do a little, interaction here. So when you think about your own spiritual experiences or those of people that you know, they fell into 3 to 4 primary categories. What do you think some of them might have been? Nature. Okay, that was one. Experiences in meditation in nature. That was one. What else? Prayer. Well, that would go in the category of meditation in nature. Prayer, meditation in nature. Yep. What was that? Community. Community. Yes, implicitly. Especially in making further meaning of those kinds of experiences. What else? Music. Music, yep. There was some with music. Miracles. I heard a few miracles, but I heard a lot about dreams and synchronicities. You know what synchronicities are? You know, this is something that Carl Jung, psychologist Carl Jung, talked a lot about, where he says there's no coincidences. You know, it's like this person appears in your life that all of a sudden you just really needed. You were looking for something and that person appeared and seemed to have the message for you. You know, and another one that was particularly significant, this was true for all the women in the study and all the men who are fathers. What do you think it would be? Childbirth. So I put that as birth, death, and close calls. So that was that category. And there was a last category where this really got more into spiritual development, where people talked about crossing culture or going deeper into their culture of origin to facilitate their own spiritual development. So, but I'm going to primarily not talk about that as much today. So I've had a number of experiences, spiritual experiences, like I said. And they seem to happen at times, often they happen at times when I need to make a big decision. So, so about probably 34 years ago, when I was finishing my doctoral degree and getting my first academic position, you know, my major advisor was arguing that I should go to a major research university because they have more funds and they support your research and blah, 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 blah. And there was this job at Antioch University in Seattle. And Antioch is the same Antioch as Yellow Springs in Ohio. And well, I thought this job sounded like it had my name on it. And so I had this dream. I was trying to figure out what to do because my 2 big interviews were at the University of Oklahoma and at Antioch University in Seattle. So I had this dream, and in the dream, I was floating on a rubber raft in Alaska. And here I was in Georgia. I did my doctorate at the University of Georgia. I was floating on a rubber raft in Alaska, and my father was with me, but I was teaching in this non-traditional program, and I had to leave to go teach my class. And so I woke up, and I said to my then partner, I said, this was about Antioch. You know, because in my mind, little did I know, and living in Georgia at the time, I thought Seattle and Alaska were right next to each other. So relative to Georgia, they are, but still they're pretty far apart. But the dream itself was so powerful that no matter what anybody told me, if I was offered that job, that is where I was going. And I tend to be, you know, fairly compliant and respectful of people that mentor me. And so I had to, you know, really stand up for why I wanted to go to Antioch. So that following November, so I go to Antioch in Seattle, and I'm giving a talk at a conference on feminist theory. And there is a woman in the audience, and her name is Gretchen Birch, and she is from Alaska. And at the end of my talk, she said it would be really good. She said, I invite people, she taught at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. I invite people to teach for me, and I would really like for you to come teach for me this summer. Well, people say stuff like that at conferences, but oftentimes nothing ever comes from it. Oh, the other part of the story is that in the dream, there were fjords in Alaska, in the dream. And so I told my then partner, I said, I must be mixed up with, Scandinavia or something, because there were fjords in the dream. So anyway, I go to Gretchen's place, and her family homesteaded in Alaska before it was a state. And so she's taking me to the place, this island in Ketchimak Bay, and she said, and there are the fjords over there. And I'm like, fjords? So Gretchen became a lifelong friend of mine, and I went to Alaska, about 8 times, teaching classes for her in different summers over the course of my career. So I felt like I was following an invisible thread. The dream itself was so strong that I had to pay attention to the dream as opposed to what my major professor was telling me at the time. And so, I eventually did end up at a major research university. I eventually ended up at Penn State, but that was a great place for me to start my career. So that was a career, something about my career path. But there's also other experiences that I've had where I feel like I'm following an invisible thread. And when I was in college, some of these have to do with significant people in your life. So Gretchen became a really significant person in my life. So when I was in college, I was 19 or 20, and I had a fair amount of anxiety. And I went to the health center one night because I used to always break out in hives when I was anxious. I went to the health center this one night, and there was this woman there, another student, and she was a little out there, and she was on the phone with her father, and she was like, "Hey, Dad, what I really miss is my pillow," and she wasn't doing very well, obviously. Well, that young woman ended up living on my floor in my dorm the following year, and she was really normal. So I never forgot her, because it was like, see, you can seem to be like really nuts, and then you end up okay, because think of that Marta person. So when I moved to Seattle to work at Antioch University, there was this couple across the street that had a baby, and I was talking to them and outside when the moving van was there, and I asked them their names, and I said that I was from Massachusetts originally and that I went to college in Maine. She said, "Oh, really?" She said, I went to college in Maine too for the first 2 years. And then she was a nurse, so she had to go to a different campus after that. And so I turned to walk across the street, and she smiled at me, and I said, "Was your maiden name Richardson?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Did you go by Marty then?" And she said, "Yes." So this was the woman, 20 years later, an entire continent away, crossing my path. Well, she has become, again, she wasn't a significant person in my life so much when I was in college, but over the years, she became a very significant person. I was present at the birth of her daughter. And she was the person that told me, I didn't refer to her name, but talked me into walking the Camino in 2012 when I was messing around with Match.com following a divorce. She said, "Forget Match.com, your match is the Camino. You should do the Camino this summer." So that was the same person. So that's another way of feeling like I'm following an invisible thread. Third story, or fourth story, I'm not sure what we're up to. I was married. I went to Greece in 2011, with my then husband. I was going to another conference, and he was being a perfect pill, in my judgment. But I thought, well, I've always wanted to go to these places, and I'm going to have a good time. And our marriage was struggling at the time. So we go to the Oracle at Delphi, it was part of a tour. So, and it was a madhouse. There was, if you've ever been there, you know, the tour bus gets off, all these people go to Delphi, and then they go to the place where they did the games, you know, up at the top, and then they go to the amphitheater. And so somehow I lost Terry, my husband, when I was up at the amphitheater place. And so a friend of mine was at the amphitheater place and I looked down and there was nobody sitting at the Oracle place at the time. And so I said to my friend Tal, I'm going to go down there and I want you to take my picture. So I said, okay, Oracle, what do I do about this marriage? And I swear to God, this is what happened. This voice comes into my head that says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the law of nature and nature's God entitled them. I'm like, what is that? That is something from 8th grade geography that I had to memorize. And then I realized, what was it? What is that? Declaration of Independence. Well, this was not what I wanted for a sign. You know, this was not what I wanted for a sign. This is just a blip in your marriage, everything will be fine. So I didn't tell anybody for 3 weeks, including my husband. And then I was telling this friend of mine about it, and she said, this is big, Libby Tisdell. You pay attention to this. This is big. Well, it was big. And I was so loyal that I wasn't likely to leave a marriage, even if it wasn't, you know, without something hitting me over my head. So, you know, I got divorced, watched the Camino the following summer. You heard some of that story. And then one of the big experiences of my life was midwifing my mother's death. If you've ever been present at a death, you know, dealing with death is difficult, and my mother did not have an easy death. And she didn't do anything for the last couple of days but that horrible breathing. But then she got my attention. She squeezed my hand twice when she took her last breath. And I felt like she was anointing me for some really, really important work. And so after that, I became less afraid of death. That was my first real experience of being present at a death. And so I decided, well, you know, this was incredibly meaningful to me. And so in my involvement at the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg, there was a group of friends. We called ourselves FOF, the Festival of Friends, because there was a song that we would always sing at the end of our gatherings. Well, one of our members of our group, a woman that was probably my closest friend in Harrisburg, she developed cancer and died 9 months later. And I midwifed her death with my group. And so I was very close to her. I'm also a massage therapist, and I did some massage work and energy work with her. And so I had a project going on in Hershey at the time, so I was at the medical center a lot, so I'd stop in and see her. So after Mary Kay died, you know, I was close to her family, you know, anyway. I knew her children and her husband. And so about a year after she died, her husband, he would call me whenever the kids were in town, and I would go, you know, go hang out with them and stuff. And then I sort of felt like, I think maybe he's putting the moves on me, you know. And I thought, it didn't have to do so much with how I felt about him at the time. It was a bit confusing, because what he did was, I have this Chilean chanting thing at my house every year, and we sing sacred chants from all the world's religious traditions, and we do poetry, and we drink wine. And so Jim had come to this Chilean chanting thing at my house, so he, somebody had requested something that we sang at her funeral, like one of the chants that we sang at her funeral, and I thought, oh man, this is going to be really hard for Jim, even though it's been almost a year later. But, you know, we did it, and I said after that, okay, how about a poem? Who wants a poem? Anybody got a poem? And Jim says, well, this is a good time. I have a poem. And he said, oh, it's been a really difficult year, but there was this incredible group of women. And I thought, oh, he's going to do a poem for our FOF group. And he said, Libby, this is for you. Something. And he does a love poem. It's not like a romantic poem, but, you know, it's about love and friendship and, you know, getting you through community. Somebody said community. How community helps you deal with some of life's challenges, but it's like, oh, you know, I didn't really quite know how to respond to that. So I'm like, who wants some wine? You know? So anyway, to make a long story even longer, you know, so we decided to hang out for a few months, and that he was getting a little pushy, you know? And I was like, Jim, you know, I don't know. I think we should just let this marinate. You're like my really good friend's husband. You know, I mean, I know she's dead, but, you know, this feels a little weird. So my husband's a bonsai artist, so he went off to Japan and for something, and he came back, and he had all these little presents for me. We were going to a concert. And on the way, when I was driving up to his house, because the venue was closer to his house than to mine, I'm like, Mary Kay, I need a sign. I need a sign. You know, what do I do about this relationship? I don't know what to do, and I don't want to, you know. And so we had all these little presents for me. And the last one, he says, I have one more present for you. They were all small. And he said, this is a letter that you wrote. And I was unloading my luggage, daydreaming about you. And this letter that you wrote to Mary Kay on her last birthday fell out of my luggage in Japan. And he said, we didn't go anywhere after this except to the hospital, but it must have really meant a lot to her, and she must have brought it with her, and it was still in the luggage. So I'm like, okay, Mary Kay, I'm in. There's my sign. So I figured if this letter can go all the way around the world and back to me, well, I'm going to take that as a sign. So that was, I don't know, that was 10 years ago. And so Jim and I hung out for a few years, and then we got married in, I don't know what year, 2017, I think, maybe 18. So that's where I feel like when I need to make a big decision, something always happens. And it makes me feel like I'm making the right decision. So, I mean, the only person that can decide that is me, ultimately. But there is, I call this this is part of the interconnecting web. And so when I did my research study way back in the early 2000s, late 1999, early 2000s, I was interested in activist experiences in doing social justice, because I don't consider myself exactly an activist, but in the academic sense, I'm an activist in terms of was always calling people to think more deeply about things. And yes, you know, I did the No Kings March, and I do some of these things. But the invisible thread, some people will connect this notion of the invisible thread with the seventh principle, the interconnecting web of life, and our work for social justice. There's one woman in particular, her name is, she's a journalist, Kate Woodson, and she kind of comes off the feminist maxim, you know, the personal is political, that was very big in the 80s and 90s, and she's talking about these personal experiences that we have implications for doing social justice work. And so you can read some of her work. She got an award for some of her coverage of the July 6th uprising, and for her involvement of looking at the connection between individual trauma and the trauma that we're facing and trying to deal with democracy. Now, I'm sure you all have experiences of feeling like you're following the invisible thread. And so my, as a UU, and as someone who's basically a theist, depending on what that means, or even basically a Christian, although I'm not into the bodily resurrection. I don't think that's the point. So depending on how you define some of these terms, I do feel like there is an interconnecting web that guides all of us. And much like my friend Charlotte, who is fixing her web, that when, we're in a bit of a mess at the moment as a country, and I try not to lose hope because, to be hopeless would be an affront to people who went before me, who worked so hard that we might have justice. And so, but it's because of these experiences of an invisible thread that makes me believe that there is a mystery of something much bigger than ourselves. And part of that mystery is the mystery of community, because it's in a sense of community that we begin to make sense of our individual thread experiences, and that give us the power and the courage to take action when we need to. So I do believe that there is a connection between this notion of the individual thread, invisible thread, your individual spiritual experiences, and doing social justice work. And so I'm going to end. I'd like you to think about your own invisible thread experiences or significant dreams that you've had, and maybe you can share some of them at coffee hour. But I'm going to end with, this is supposedly an ancient Chinese proverb. I don't know if it really is, but the internet said it was. So for whatever that's worth, I liked it. An invisible thread connects those who are destined to meet, regardless of time, place, or circumstances. The thread may stretch or tangle, but it will never break. May you be open to each thread that comes into your life, the golden ones and the coarse ones, and may you weave them into a brilliant and beautiful life. And may you share that life with those gathered here. Thank you. And for our anthem today, we're going to do this little thing on following the invisible thread. And I taught it to you. So those of you that were here early, I taught it to you a little bit earlier. So it's very simple because I don't write anything that's difficult. So it goes like this. Follow the invisible thread. And we're going to sing that 3 times. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Back to the breath. Back to the breath. And back to the source of all life. Back to the source of all life. Okay, now if you have a middle voice, I'm going to always just sing the same thing on Follow the Invisible Thread, but we sing it 3 times, right? So in the middle part, you could go, follow the invisible thread. Try that, some of you. Follow the invisible thread. And there's a high part. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Okay, so you can sing whatever part you want, but I'm going to stick on my low part, okay? So we'll sing it, the whole thing twice, and then I'll sing a verse, and then we'll sing it twice again. And this is our anthem, and try to get into a meditation space as you listen to this, as you sing this. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Back to the breath.
all life. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Back to the breath. Back to the source of all life. The web of life is strong, stronger than you might think, as broken threads are woven back together by the weaver of life. Grandmother spider, follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Back to the breath. Back to the source of all life. One more time. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Follow the invisible thread. Back to the source of all. Back to the breath of life. As Reverend Libby puts away her guitar, you know that quote, people come into your life for a reason, for a season, for a lifetime. Have you heard that one? Just her stories reminded me of that when she was sharing with us. Typically this summer there will not be reflections, but Reverend Libby did ask for one today. So here's my reflection on the topic. Every so often, a bird or an animal or an insect comes across your path and causes you to stop, to just be in the moment. Maybe a hummingbird, a frog, a ladybug. Often, a brown toad would appear on the sidewalk as I was walking the dog, or be sitting beside the terracotta pot outside my door. Once I even stepped on it by mistake. After numerous toad visits like this, I Googled toad plus symbolism plus meaning. Toads symbolize transformation, renewal, and adaptability across various cultures, often associated with healing and ability to navigate both emotional and physical realms, indicating personal growth and change. This May, days before leaving on an overseas trip, there came an insistent clamor at the sliding door in the living room. Toad was uncharacteristically jumping at the glass. Sliding it open, I stepped outside, and yes, I talked to the little guy. Because just maybe this is how the universe asks us to pay attention. Yes, but attention to what exactly? Fast forward a few days, and we are scheduled to leave from Newark Airport for France. Yes, the same EWR where the air traffic control system had gone dark for 90 seconds while planes circled and landed and took off. Not just once, but 3 times recently, their system went down. I am in prepare to die mode, I've been collecting my end-of-life documents, realizing how many darn passwords an executor will need to access my accounts, and saying meaningful things to close friends and family. One UUCL friend, Maria Murray, chastises me. "Stop it! You are sending out all this negative energy, and it will just attract more." Okay, she's right. So I switch to, "All will be well." And I send Reiki energy to those air traffic controllers. All will be well. While I'm packing a Paris guide that I pulled from the bookcase. I discovered there's a postcard inside with a stamp from a bookstore called Shakespeare and Company, and it's near Notre Dame Cathedral. Under the American owner, George Whitman, this English bookstore attracted the expat community in Paris, especially writers. My husband, Michael, who died in 2013, was one of the so-called tumbleweeds and slept in a free cot for 2 months in exchange for a couple of hours' work each day, the promise to read one book daily and write a one-page autobiography. Now, this postcard was dated 18 June 2012. That was the year Michael walked the Camino de Santiago, and he stopped in Paris en route to check in. So I take the postcard along as a reminder to maybe visit this iconic store during our group retreat. A week later, we're talking good books for travel if you like to read novels set in the country that you're visiting. And someone mentions this title, The Paris Bookseller. It's a book about the early Shakespeare and Company, run by Sylvia Beach. Reminder number 2. Our self-guided trip had a lot of challenges due to a rail strike when the trains were constantly being cancelled in France, and we're desperately trying to rebook on French language websites, BlaBlaCar, rideshares, or Flixbus. But the final 3 days were in Paris. On a morning walking tour with other Americans and Canadians, I noticed a woman ahead of me sporting a Shakespeare and Company tote bag. Reminder number 3. Yes, she had been there before. However, the bookstore has become an Instagram destination, and there's a 1 to 2 hour queue outside to enter, but inside a manageable number of book lovers. So my question to you all is there an invisible thread? Was the universe sending a message? Or is it just a series of coincidences? Would you have prioritized a visit? All right, what's next?
Thank you, Marion, for sharing your story and perspective. And so now you've heard some interesting stories of synchronicity and following the invisible thread. So now we take a moment of silence, and perhaps in these moments, you can contemplate your own synchronistic experiences of following the invisible thread and how it relates to the 7th principle of the interconnecting web of life.
And now is the time when we affirm that this church community matters to us. We affirm it by taking an offering towards the mission of the church and its programs and staff. Half the offering this month goes to Littitz Chooses Love, a grassroots organization committed to advocating for LGBTQ+ individuals by creating safe social spaces and connecting community members with local resources. The ushers will now pass the baskets and accept your offering. Now in the service, it's time for the community to silently offer its reflections on joys and sorrows by coming up the center aisle and then putting a stone in the sand over there by Marion, representing your joy or sorrow. And please return by the side aisles while Alan plays in the background.
world. Marion, could you put another stone in the sand for peace between Israel and Iran and the US, and for all the war-torn places in the world? And another stone for the joys and sorrows that remain silent in our hearts. So singer-songwriter Melody DeMore sings a song about sending light. And we're going to use this as part of our pastoral prayer. And we did, for those of you that were here early, you did hear it before. It goes, now I'll sing it once for you, and then you sing it, and each time we'll sing it twice. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. Everyone, I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. Let us pray. O Spirit of life, great mystery, each of us are on this journey called life. We are living in very strange and uncertain times. Help each of us to live life by remembering that we are connected to a sacred source and to each other by an invisible thread that constitutes the web of life that continues to offer us light and access to those who promise to offer us light. And help us to remember, and we sing, I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. Great Spirit, help us to live our lives with intention as much as possible, grounded in earth and in nature, to Grandmother Spider, at the same time that we connect to the heavens and the wind and air and something bigger than ourselves. Help us to remember to focus on attention to our breath and heartbeat, to cultivate a heart of love, even when life feels overwhelming. Help us to remember in these moments the importance of trying to cultivate an attitude of gratitude, and that nothing is hopeless. For as Holly Near in her song, I Am Willing, sings, to be hopeless would seem so strange because it dishonors those who went before us. So help us to remember in these times to cultivate an attitude of gratitude and to center on light and to remember, I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. Finally, Great Spirit, help us to attune both to our own hearts and the spirit of the moment, to the magic of nature, to breathe into the fire and courage of our own hearts, to remember to take action when necessary, recognizing that sometimes meditation itself is an action. Let this be our focus in living life daily with intention, attention, attitude, and attunement to moments both sacred and profane, and to help us to remember, I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. May it be so. Amen.
Unitarian Universalism does not have a creed. In this church, we have a covenant and our affirmation of faith. It's inside the gray hymnal. We will say it first in English and then in Spanish. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is our gift. This is our great covenant, held together in peace, to seek the truth in love and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia y el servicio es su ofrenda. Este es nuestro gran pacto, el convivir unidos en paz, el buscar la verdad en amor y ayudarnos unos a los otros. The announcements are in the insert to your order of service. Please take a look at them. And if any of you know Dawn Connolly, formerly Dawn Peterson, please make sure and thank her for coordinating the UU table and the volunteers yesterday at the Marriott downtown for the LGBTQ Day. Thank you.
And please join us in the closing song, Turn the World Around. And we're going to turn the world around by following the invisible thread, right? So if you feel inclined, stand up and we'll turn the world around, number 1074 in your teal hymnal.
And to help everybody catch this rhythm, because it's unusual and it's very fun, we're going to have you clap it twice. Craig will lead the way. I'm going to play it once, then you can clap it twice, and then we'll start singing We Come From the Fire.
Okay?
We come from the fire.
Okay.
Okay, ready? So I'll play it once, and then you can clap along with Craig twice, and we start singing. So.
closing benediction, we do as Simon says here, I wish you peace. I wish you friendship. I wish you love. I see your beauty. I hear your needs. Your wisdom comes from a higher source. I salute that source within you. And let us work together. And we'll do it silently. Blessings to you all, and follow the invisible thread.